Hi guys, if you clicked on this video, you're probably wondering whether or not a wedding is worth it to you in terms of time, energy, and money. And of course, the answer to this question is going to vary greatly from person to person. So today we're going to talk about 5 little mini exercises or sort of questions that you can ask yourself to help you to determine what your values are in terms of weddings and wedding planning, and then help you to decide whether or not a wedding is worth it for you. Another way you can think about this is, will you regret it if you don't have a wedding? So my name is Brittany from wayfaringweddings.com. I'm currently planning my own wedding and I'm trying to make it as budget friendly and eco-friendly as possible, and making videos here to sort of discuss these questions I'm having about my own wedding with all of you. So if you want to join me in this journey, please like this video to encourage me, and subscribe to my channel. So yeah, like I said, whether or not a wedding is worth it is going to be really, really different for all of us. And when I say a wedding, I'm specifically talking about the wedding itself and not a marriage. Is a marriage worth it or not? That's a question for another video, I think. And when I say wedding, I'm not necessarily talking about a gigantic, extravagant wedding, which is not at all what I'm planning for myself. And so yeah, just a wedding at all, marking the occasion in some way and putting forth some kind of time, energy, and money on this day, versus the alternative, which might be either not getting married at all, eloping, or maybe having a courthouse wedding. Okay, so that's what we're talking about, is having some kind of event, some kind of special wedding occasion worth it for you in terms of time, money, energy, etc. Okay, so the first thing I want to do together is a little exercise that'll take us into the future. So I want you to close your eyes right now, bear with me. Close your eyes right now and imagine that it is 10 years from now and you never had a wedding. So you never had any kind of ceremony or nothing to mark the occasion. Instead, you either remained unmarried, maybe still with your partner, but you remained unmarried, or you eloped, or you had a courthouse wedding but no kind of reception or anything like that. Your immediate reaction when really visualizing this 10 years from now, do you feel relief? What is the feeling that you're experiencing? Because if it is relief, if you're feeling relieved in this moment of visualization, it might be that you should do one of those things. Maybe it would be better worth your time to go to a courthouse, do the courthouse wedding, or elope, or not get married, just essentially to not have a wedding. On the other hand, if you're feeling a tinge of sadness or regret, a little bit of regret or sadness, that might be a sign that you do value weddings or marking of the marriage occasion in some way, whatever that means to you. Having a bowling alley wedding, whatever it is, it might mean that you do need to mark this occasion in some way if you're feeling a little bit of sadness, just imagining a future where you didn't do anything, okay? So what we're doing now is just kind of getting a sense of what we value. Let's do one now where we look at our past, okay? So now think about when you were younger. Did you ever have any dreams about your wedding? Did you have these sort of stereotypical childhood dreams of how your wedding would be? Did you ever imagine your wedding in any way? Not just as a child, but you know, whatever, as a teenager, young adult. Do you have any kind of preconceived ideas about what your wedding should or would look like? Okay. And I think the reason this is useful is because sometimes we think that we're not really like wedding people, which that's how I've always thought of myself, is I never really thought about my wedding or planned it. However, when I really dig into this a little bit, I realize that I do have kind of a list in the back of my head of like people I would invite to my wedding, for example. Even if I never imagined a dress or a cake or things like that, there are certain things that have built up in the back of my head as I've attended weddings over the year. Like, oh, at my wedding I would have this maybe. And I think that's important to think about, because that means you've sort of subconsciously built some expectations for your wedding, and not fulfilling those might lead to a little bit of disappointment. This is kind of like my my like dollar store psychology degree speaking here, so take this with a grain of salt. But it's just a way of thinking about what you value in your life, and how important a wedding might be to you, by thinking about how much, even subconsciously, how much you've thought about your wedding in the past. If you do take inventory of this and you realize, oh man, I do have a kind of a vision of how I want my wedding to be. I didn't really think about that, but I do have sort of an idea of how I want my wedding to be. Maybe just realize you have those expectations, and either realize that maybe you should try to fulfill them by having some kind of wedding, or just adjust your expectations so that you're not disappointed when you don't have a wedding, if you don't have a wedding. So anyway, what I'm trying to say here is you want to take all of your expectations, maybe even expectations you didn't realize you had, and match those to whatever your ultimate decision is going to be about whether or not to have a wedding, or to have a small wedding or a big wedding or an elopement or whatever, right? We just don't want to charge forth into the future not having sort of evaluated and critically considered all of these expectations that we currently have, or that maybe we're holding deep within ourselves. And so now let's look at a third question or exercise, however you want to think about this. And this is just to think about what your family's expectations are for you getting married, or you having a wedding. Sorry, not getting married, but having some kind of wedding day. Does your family expect for you to have a wedding? And if so, is this important to you as well? Like, is it important to make your family happy in this way? So this is not to say that you have to do what your family wants you to do or expects you to do, but just to consider that this could be a point of contention, and it might be worth it for some people to appease their families in some way, whether that means just having a simple backyard occasion, or getting together and having a family party, not necessarily having a giant expensive wedding to appease your family. But it might be worth it to you, if your family has these really big expectations for a wedding, to do something, to have some kind of compromise there, if those relationships are really important to you. Okay, so the reason I think about this is because for me, my partner is from Quebec in Canada, and there's no expectation at all for people just don't really get married in Quebec. I mean, some people do, but it's not as common as it is where I'm from, which is the US. So you'll meet a lot of older couples who have been together for a really long time in Quebec, but who have never been married. And so for my partner's family, it's just not a big deal. It's not a big expectation that we would get married or whatever. So it's just really important to consider this from the culture you're coming from your family. What are the expectations? Are you going to disappoint a lot of people in your family or your community by not getting married? And if that's important to you, maybe it's at least worth considering. Not that you have to do anything or feel pressured to do anything you don't want to do, but just to take everything into consideration and think about the context. And then the fourth question to ask yourself when you're considering whether or not a wedding is worth it for you is, of course, the financial situation you find yourself in. I'm definitely of the mindset that you should not be experiencing any kind of financial stress, or go into debt, or have to take out loans or anything crazy like that in order to have a wedding. I personally think that a backyard wedding or a simple wedding can be just as, if not greatly more beautiful and impactful as a big, crazy, expensive, extravagant wedding. So yeah, I don't think that your finances should stop you from having a wedding, but that you should take them into consideration and work within the budget that you have, okay? So if you're back to expectations, it all comes back to expectations and values, right? So if your expectations are so high for for your wedding, you want this really expensive wedding, but your budget is low, then a wedding is not going to be worth it. It's not going to fulfill all of the dreams that you have, and you're going to end up spending a lot of money, or spending a certain amount of money, but not getting what you want and just experiencing disappointment. So not worth it. However, if you find a way, do a lot of soul searching, and you find a way to match your expectations with whatever financial situation, with the budget that you have, then you can be extremely satisfied, and for sure your wedding can be worth it to you. So yeah, the term worth it, we're talking about money, we're talking about your time, and we're talking about your energy and anxiety levels as well, when we're talking about is it worth it or not. So all of these 4 exercises are really just about exploring what you really want, okay? Which is going to be so different for every person. It's really 4 different ways of thinking about what you want. Okay, and then finally, the 5th thing to do on this list to determine whether or not a wedding is going to be worth it for you is to repeat steps 1 through 4 with your partner. To ask your partner to do these steps as well. Because the wedding is not just about one person, right? There's 2 people having this day here. So it might be that you have greatly different expectations than your partner, and it's really important that you both get on the same page with this. Okay guys, I really hope that these little mini exercises help you in trying to do a bit of soul searching and determining whether or not a wedding is worth it for you. I wish you the best of luck in making this very important decision. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel.